Amara Lewis had always taken pride in her hard work and accomplishments. Growing up in a poor neighborhood, she often found herself judged by the color of her skin and her background rather than her character. But Amara refused to let her circumstances define her life. Through perseverance and intelligence, she overcame every prejudice and became a respected and talented lawyer. Recently, she had landed a significant consulting contract with a multinational corporation, which required her to travel frequently through the city's more affluent areas. That afternoon, Amara had just left an important meeting and was driving the luxurious car her husband, David Carter, had given her as an anniversary gift. The streets were quiet, bathed in soft sunlight filtering through lush green trees lining the road. Suddenly, the wail of a siren broke the tranquility. Amara glanced in her rearview mirror to see a police car flashing its lights, signaling her to pull over. Confused and unsure of what she had done wrong, she complied and stopped by the curb. A tall officer with a buzz cut and a cold expression approached her window. The name badge on his uniform read F. Turner. License and registration, Turner demanded curtly, offering no greeting or explanation. Amara calmly handed over her documents, keeping her tone composed. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being pulled over? You're driving in an area that's not exactly suited for people like you," Turner replied with contempt. "This car looks a little too nice for someone like you. Are you sure you didn't steal it?" Amara was stunned. Turner's words felt like a slap to her dignity. Before she could respond, Turner ordered her to step out of the car. Knowing she was entirely innocent, Amara complied to avoid escalating the situation. Turner proceeded to search her car without permission, all the while making degrading comments about her background and the color of her skin. Curious passersby stopped to watch, adding to her humiliation and anger. "I will document this and report it to your superiors," Amara said, striving to keep her composure. Turner sneered. "My superiors won't do a thing. Who do you think you are?" Amara arrived home late in the evening, still shaken by what had happened. David was in his study, reviewing some legal documents. As soon as Amara walked in, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. "What happened, Amara?" David asked, setting down his papers and moving toward her. Amara, her voice trembling, recounted the entire incident. She described every detail, from Turner's disdainful gaze to the way he searched her car as if she were a criminal. The more David listened, the angrier he became. "He didn't just insult you. He blatantly broke the law," David said, his eyes cold with determination. "I'm not going to let this slide." Amara, though deeply hurt, hesitated to turn the incident into a larger battle. But David, as a judge, understood the consequences of remaining silent. "We can't let him continue to treat anyone else like this," David said firmly, his voice resolute. Frank Turner sat in his usual bar near the police station, sipping his beer with a smug expression. He recounted the story of stopping a suspicious car thief to his colleagues, turning Amara into the butt of a crude joke. "She thought she could give me a hard time," Turner said with a loud laugh. "Just another stupid black woman." His colleagues, many sharing similar prejudices, erupted in laughter and congratulated Turner for the lesson he had taught Amara. What none of them realized, however, was that Turner's actions weren't just the result of bias. They were part of a long history of abuse of power. In the police department's filing cabinets were numerous reports of incidents involving Turner, most of which cited misconduct and excessive force. Yet, thanks to his connections within the department, he had always escaped accountability. "This system protects me," Turner often told his peers. "We are the law." David wasted no time taking action. With his legal expertise and extensive network, he immediately reached out to colleagues and demanded an investigation into Turner's actions. Meanwhile, Amara actively participated in gathering evidence. They reviewed security camera footage from nearby stores at the scene of the incident. The videos captured Turner stopping Amara's car and his treatment of her. Turner's degrading comments were clearly recorded thanks to a passerby who had filmed the incident on their phone. David's task was far from simple. He knew that to take on a police officer like Turner, they had to be meticulously prepared. Together with Amara, David reached out to human rights organizations for support. "This isn't just a personal issue," Amara said during a meeting with their legal team. "It's part of a larger systemic problem. We need to fight for everyone out there." Amara's story began to gain traction in the media. Articles and social media posts quickly spread, sparking outrage from the community. Many others, especially past victims of Turner, started to come forward with their own stories. David understood that this was only the beginning. The legal battle ahead would be long and challenging, but he was determined to defend his wife and bring justice to all those affected. Amara's case quickly became a focal point in the media and on social platforms. A video recorded by a bystander showing Frank Turner abusing his power and making deeply offensive remarks went viral. Hashtags like #JusticeForAmara, #EndPoliceRacism, and #AccountabilityNow began trending, garnering millions of shares. Amara had never sought the spotlight, but she understood that her story had struck a chord with many. Black women, victims of discrimination, and human rights activists joined forces to voice their support. Amara appeared on a national television interview. During the program, she not only recounted the incident but also spoke about the systemic injustice faced by people of color daily. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," Amara said, her tone calm but resolute. "But I will do everything in my power to make sure it's the last time Turner, or anyone else, gets away with such behavior." At the same time, human rights organizations began organizing protests outside the police department. Signs with messages like "Justice for All" and "End Racial Profiling" filled the streets of major cities. The community, regardless of race or ethnicity, came together for a shared cause. However, not everyone supported Amara. Some individuals, particularly from conservative groups, accused her of exaggerating the issue or seeking attention. Negative comments flooded social media. David, closely monitoring the developments, recognized that this wasn't just a legal battle but also a fight to shift societal awareness. He encouraged Amara to keep speaking out and not let the critics discourage her. As the community erupted over the incident, Frank Turner began facing unforeseen consequences in his personal life. His wife, Linda, a gentle schoolteacher, started receiving threatening phone calls from supporters of Amara. Their daughter's classmates whispered about the controversy, leaving the girl feeling embarrassed and isolated. Sitting across from Turner at the dinner table, Linda spoke in a tense voice. "Frank, this has to stop. You need to apologize and take responsibility. You're not just destroying your career, you're hurting this family." Instead of admitting fault, Turner snapped, "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just doing my job. They're all trying to make me a scapegoat." Linda stood up, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Your job doesn't give you the right to humiliate others. You didn't just ruin that woman's life. You're tearing this family apart. If you don't change, I'm not sure we can keep doing this." Linda's words haunted Turner, but instead of reflecting on them, he became even more defiant. Turner vowed to defend his reputation at all costs, even if it meant destroying anyone who stood in his way. While Turner worked to defend himself, Amara and David reached out to human rights organizations to build a stronger legal team. One of these organizations was the Equal Justice Alliance, led by Angela Rodriguez, a renowned attorney specializing in human rights cases. Angela was immediately drawn to Amara's story. "I've been a human rights lawyer for over 20 years, Angela said during their first meeting with Amara. "But rarely have I seen a case that so clearly exposes abuse of power and discrimination like this. We will fight this to the end." Angela and her team began meticulously reviewing Turner's professional history. They uncovered that he had been the subject of at least 7 similar complaints, all of which had been dismissed thanks to internal connections. Amara felt reinvigorated knowing she wasn't alone. Alongside Angela, many other victims of Turner came forward. An elderly man recounted how Turner had treated him harshly simply for living in a dangerous neighborhood. A young man shared how Turner had intimidated him while he was walking home late at night. These stories not only strengthened the case but also sparked a larger social movement, bringing attention to systemic abuses of power. But Turner was not one to back down easily. Through his lawyer, he launched a counterattack. Turner claimed that he was merely following standard procedures in what he described as a dangerous situation. He even fabricated a story, alleging that Amara had been aggressive and uncooperative, forcing him to take stronger measures. Turner's legal team also sought to tarnish Amara's reputation. They dug into her past, attempting to uncover any potential missteps, and even fabricated stories to smear her image in the media. Anonymous articles surfaced online, accusing Amara of exploiting her race for personal gain. Amara was appalled by the underhanded tactics. However, David and Angela reassured her, emphasizing that the truth would ultimately prevail. "We have the evidence," Angela said firmly. "Let him lie. The more he fabricates, the less the public will trust him." Meanwhile, David used his connections within the legal system to expedite the investigation. He knew that Turner's misconduct extended beyond Amara's case and involved numerous other scandals. As Turner pushed back, the truth began to emerge. The harder he fought, the more he was exposed as an abusive officer unworthy of his badge. The battle against Frank Turner was far from simple. While Amara's legal team focused on exposing Turner's misconduct, he continued to fight back, relying on long-standing relationships within the police force and local government. David noticed that the investigation into Turner was being obstructed. Certain officials within the police department, many of whom had benefited from Turner's help in covering up their own wrongdoing, were deliberately slowing the release of critical documents. "Some people in this system don't want the truth to come out," David said to Amara and Angela during a private meeting. "We need to find a way to increase the pressure." Amara suggested engaging the press and media more actively. Angela agreed and quickly organized a major press conference where they publicly revealed initial evidence of Turner's misconduct. Photos and videos of Turner abusing his power, along with records of past complaints, were brought to light. Public outrage grew stronger than ever. The police department had no choice but to launch a formal internal investigation. An independent investigative team, including legal experts and human rights advocates, was brought in to ensure transparency. During the investigation, however, Amara's team uncovered a startling revelation. Turner wasn't just an officer abusing his authority. He had been accepting bribes from a criminal organization in the city to overlook their illegal activities. "This isn't just about racial discrimination anymore," Angela said, her eyes lighting up with the gravity of the discovery. "We're dealing with corruption on a much larger scale." Finally, the case went to court. The courtroom was packed with journalists, Amara's supporters, and local officials closely following the proceedings. Frank Turner entered with a cold demeanor, attempting to appear confident, but the worry in his eyes betrayed him. Amara was the key witness in the trial. As she stepped onto the stand, she took a deep breath to steady herself. The room fell silent as she began recounting the events of that day, her voice firm yet filled with emotion. "He didn't just abuse his power," Amara said, her gaze fixed on the jury. "He tried to make me feel worthless, just because of the color of my skin." Turner's legal team attempted to undermine her credibility with pointed and malicious questions, but Amara stood her ground. With Angela's guidance, she answered every question clearly and confidently, turning their attempts to discredit her into a futile effort. When it was Turner's turn to testify, he continued to deny all accusations. However, the evidence presented by Amara and her team was overwhelming. Videos of the incident, testimonies from other witnesses, and records of Turner's past misconduct painted an undeniable picture. No amount of denial could counter the compelling case against him. At the same time, The media continued to amplify the case. Major television networks hosted discussions on racial discrimination within law enforcement, while prominent newspapers published in-depth investigative series on Turner and similar incidents within the system. Amara's supporters tirelessly protested outside the courthouse, holding signs with messages like, "Justice is not a privilege, it's a right." They gathered not only to show solidarity with her, but also to demand sweeping reforms in the police system. Meanwhile, the mounting media pressure forced local officials to act. The city's mayor, who had previously remained silent on the matter, finally issued an official statement. "We are committed to ensuring that any abuse of power is met with justice, and that our system is reformed so that no one else has to endure such injustices." Although it was just a statement, it signaled that the case had sparked a broader impact, exceeding Amara's initial expectations. The growing attention on Amara's case forced local authorities to face uncomfortable questions from both the public and journalists. The mayor and police department leadership were compelled to hold a press conference to address their accountability in allowing someone like Turner to remain in the system for so long. How could an officer with such a history of complaints not be investigated? One reporter asked bluntly. The police chief, while attempting to justify the oversight, failed to provide a satisfactory answer. Public pressure led to the suspension of several high-ranking officials and the initiation of a comprehensive review of all officers within the force. At the same time, human rights activists organized a massive protest in the city center. Thousands of people participated, holding signs demanding justice and systemic reform. Amara also attended the rally, where she addressed the crowd. "Today, we are not just fighting for me. We are fighting for everyone who has ever been abused by power, for anyone who has ever been judged because of the color of their skin. This is not just about one woman. It's about an entire community." Amara's words ignited the crowd, which erupted into cheers and applause. She was no longer just a victim. She had become a symbol of hope and change. As the investigation delved deeper into Frank Turner's actions, Amara's legal team, led by Angela Rodriguez, uncovered a series of shocking documents and records. These revealed that Turner had not only abused his authority but also accepted bribes from local criminal organizations. One of the most significant discoveries came from an overlooked internal report from 5 years earlier. The report detailed allegations by a colleague accusing Turner of collaborating with a weapons smuggling gang. However, at the time, Turner somehow escaped the investigation. David requested access to additional files and quickly discovered that Turner had been involved in at least 3 major cases where suspects were inexplicably released after Turner's involvement in the investigation. "This is undeniable evidence," Angela said, pointing at the documents. "Turner isn't just an abusive officer. He's a traitor to justice." Amara felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. "This means he's destroyed the lives of so many people, not just mine," she said. News of these revelations quickly leaked to the public. The press published scathing articles criticizing Turner and the system that had shielded him. The community grew even more outraged upon learning that someone like Turner had been protected by the very system meant to uphold justice. With the newly uncovered revelations, the wave of support for Amara grew stronger. Human rights organizations, religious communities, and even local businesses spoke out, demanding systemic change. A crowdfunding campaign was launched to support Amara's legal fight and amplify her message. Within days, the campaign raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Amara decided to host a community gathering to share her story and listen to others. Hundreds of people from all walks of life attended. At the event, many shared that they too had been victims of abuse of power, but fear or lack of resources had kept them from speaking out. An elderly woman, Mrs. Helen, held Amara's hand and said, "You are the person we've been waiting for. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for all of us." These words gave Amara renewed strength. She realized that her case wasn't just about seeking justice for herself. It was part of a larger struggle to reform an entire system. As Amara's support continued to grow, Turner began to feel the weight of isolation pressing down on him. His family bore the brunt of the fallout. His wife, Linda, decided to leave with their daughter after a heated argument. "Frank, I can't take this anymore," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "You haven't just ruined your own life. You've destroyed this family. I don't want our daughter growing up thinking that what you've done is acceptable." Turner, trying to keep his composure, couldn't contain his anger. "I've done everything for this family," he shouted. "No, Frank, you've done everything for yourself," Linda replied before walking out of the house with their daughter. The sense of betrayal and isolation left Turner more bitter than ever. He reached out to friends within the police force, but most of them avoided him, unwilling to risk being implicated in the growing scandal. Turner began to realize he was facing the storm entirely alone. Amara's case reached its climax. The courtroom was packed with spectators. Turner's defense team made their final arguments, but they were weak compared to the overwhelming evidence Amara's team had presented. David and Angela delivered sharp, compelling arguments. David addressed the jury, his eyes shining with unwavering conviction. "This case is not just about justice for Amara. It is an opportunity to prove that no one, no matter their badge or position of power, is above the law." Meanwhile, Turner continued to deny all allegations, even attempting to appear pitiable before the jury. However, his lies could not mask the undeniable truth. The trial stretched on for hours, filled with tense exchanges from both sides. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom fell into a heavy, expectant silence. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, holding a piece of paper, and read aloud, "We find the defendant, Frank Turner, guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted in cheers and tears. Turner hung his head, his face blank. As officers approached to handcuff him, Amara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was a victory not just for her but for everyone who had stood by her side throughout the long, grueling journey. After the jury delivered a guilty verdict, Frank Turner faced a sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed once again. Journalists, Amara's supporters, and onlookers eager to witness the conclusion of the high-profile case filled every seat. Turner entered in prison attire, his hands cuffed behind his back. His face showed clear signs of despair and defeat. For the first time since the trial began, he seemed to grasp the reality that he could no longer escape the consequences of his actions. Turner's lawyer pleaded for leniency, citing his years of service in law enforcement and his family's need for support. However, the prosecutor refused to concede, emphasizing that Turner had abused his power for years, inflicting significant harm not only on Amara but also on the broader community. The judge delivered the sentence in a calm but firm voice. "Frank Turner, you betrayed the trust of the community and violated the laws you swore to uphold. I hereby sentence you to 15 years in prison without parole and order restitution to be paid to your victims." The room erupted in applause, mingled with quiet sobs of relief. Amara clutched David's hand tightly, feeling as though a massive burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. This wasn't just her victory, it was a victory for everyone who had stood up against injustice. After the trial, public momentum didn't waver. Amara's story became a symbol for the movement to reform the city's police system. Human rights organizations, supported by Amara and David, organized numerous workshops and awareness campaigns on racial discrimination and abuse of power within law enforcement. Under intense community pressure, the city's mayor announced a series of sweeping reforms, including the establishment of an independent police oversight commission to handle complaints of misconduct, the implementation of mandatory anti-discrimination training for all officers, the creation of a transparent complaint process, ensuring that no one could be shielded or protected by personal connections. Amara was invited to join the Oversight Commission, a role she accepted with great honor and responsibility. "This is an opportunity for me to do more," Amara said in an interview, "not just to protect people like me, but to help build a system that is fairer and more transparent for everyone." David, meanwhile, became a vocal advocate for reform policies, leveraging his influence within the judicial system to ensure these changes were effectively implemented. Together, they worked to turn the hard-fought victory into lasting systemic change. Frank Turner began his life in prison with a bitter and isolated mindset. Most of the inmates recognized him as a former police officer, making him an immediate target in the prison. With no power or connections to protect him, Turner was forced to face the consequences of his past actions. Letters from Linda and his daughter became increasingly infrequent until they stopped altogether. Turner attempted to write apologies, but there was no response. He came to realize that not only had his career ended, but his family had also moved on without him. In a rare moment of reflection, Turner questioned how he had become the man he was. He recalled his early years in law enforcement, filled with idealism and hope for protecting the community. But over time, bitterness, prejudice, and greed had clouded everything. "I destroyed myself," Turner thought as he stared at the cold, unyielding walls of his cell. A year after the trial concluded, Amara and David organized a major conference in the city center titled Justice for All. The event drew thousands of attendees, including human rights activists, community leaders, and individuals who had experienced injustice themselves. Amara stepped onto the stage. Looking out at the crowd, she took a deep breath, reflecting on her painful yet profoundly meaningful journey. "When my case began, I never imagined it would lead to this moment," she said. "But what we've done hasn't just changed my life. It's opened a new path for all of us. Justice is not just a concept. It is a responsibility we all share to build and protect." She concluded her speech to resounding applause. Many in the crowd approached her afterward, thanking her, sharing their stories, and pledging to continue fighting for a fairer system. David stood beside Amara, holding her hand. "We did it," he said. Amara smiled. She knew the journey ahead was still long, but she no longer felt alone. She had found strength in her community, her family, and herself. As the late afternoon sunlight bathed the crowd, Amara saw hope, not just for herself but for an entire new generation rising to fight for justice and change.